The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of Prescott's general store, and Olivia Reynolds stepped down into the Arizona dust with nothing but a worn carpet bag and a reputation she couldn't shake. She'd traveled 3 weeks from St. Louis, running from whispers that followed her like shadows, and now, standing on this main street in the spring of 1878, she wondered if she'd run far enough. The driver dropped her bag at her feet without meeting her eyes. Word traveled faster than any stagecoach, apparently. Olivia straightened her threadbare dress and lifted her chin, scanning the wooden storefronts and dusty street. Prescott wasn't much, but it was supposed to be a fresh start. The letter from Mrs. Hartford had promised a teaching position at the schoolhouse, room and board included. No questions asked about her past. Olivia smoothed her dark auburn hair and walked toward the building marked Hartford's boarding house, her boots clicking against the wooden sidewalk. A group of women in their Sunday best stood outside the milliner's shop, and their conversation died the moment they spotted her. She felt their stares like pinpricks against her skin. "Excuse me," Olivia said, approaching them with what she hoped was a friendly smile. "Could you direct me to Mrs. Hartford's establishment?" The eldest woman, her silver hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her face, looked Olivia up and down with cold calculation. "Mrs. Hartford passed 3 weeks ago." Hart gave out. The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. I had correspondence with her about a teaching position." "We heard about you," another woman said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Letter came before you did. Mentioned you left your last position under unfortunate circumstances. Something about a scandal with a married man." Heat rushed to Olivia's cheeks. "That's not what happened. His wife accused me falsely because we don't need your kind here," the silver-haired woman interrupted. "We have decent families in this town, and we won't have someone of questionable morals teaching our children." Olivia's throat tightened. "Please, I need this position. I've traveled so far and I have nowhere else. That's not our concern." The women turned their backs in unison, dismissing her as completely as if she'd ceased to exist. Olivia stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching them walk away. Around her, other townspeople began to stare. A merchant swept his porch and deliberately turned his back. A mother pulled her child closer and hurried past. The shame burned through Olivia's chest, familiar and suffocating. She picked up her bag and walked down the main street, trying each business in turn. The general store owner told her they had no positions available before she'd even finished asking. The saloon keeper laughed in her face. The owner of the dress shop simply shut the door. By the time the sun began its descent toward the mountains, Olivia's feet ached and her hope had withered to almost nothing. She sat on a bench outside the telegraph office, her bag at her feet, and let herself feel the full weight of her situation. She had $17 to her name, no prospects, and nowhere to go. The spring evening air carried a chill that made her pull her thin shawl tighter. "You look like you could use a hot meal." Olivia looked up to find a man standing a respectful distance away. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that touched his collar. His eyes were a striking green that seemed to catch the fading light, and unlike everyone else she'd encountered today, they held no judgment. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen better days, with a bandana tied around his neck. "I don't have much money for meals," Olivia said quietly, too exhausted to maintain pretense. "Wasn't asking you to pay." He gestured toward a small restaurant across the street. "Name's Killian Kane. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Couldn't help but notice you've had a rough day. You could say that." Olivia studied him warily. In her experience, men who offered help usually wanted something in return. Why would you help a stranger? Killian pushed his hat back slightly. Because I know what it's like to be judged before anyone knows your story, and because it's the right thing to do. No strings attached, Miss Reynolds. Olivia Reynolds. She stood, her legs protesting after hours of walking. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Kane, but I've learned that nothing comes without strings. Then consider it Christian charity from someone who's been on the receiving end of it once or twice. His voice held a gentle humor that made something in Olivia's chest loosen slightly. I'll even sit at a different table if that makes you more comfortable. Olivia's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast at a way station early that morning. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. All right, thank you. The restaurant was small and simple, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat filling the air. The few patrons looked up when they entered, and Olivia saw recognition flicker across their faces, followed by that now familiar disapproval. Killian either didn't notice or didn't care. He guided her to a table near the back and ordered 2 plates of beef stew and cornbread. So, Killian said after the waitress had brought water and departed with obvious reluctance to serve their table, "What brings you to Prescott?" Olivia wrapped her hands around the water glass. "A job that no longer exists, apparently. Mrs. Hartford hired me to teach at the schoolhouse, but she passed away before I arrived, and the town council decided not to honor her offer." "How did you know?" Killian's expression darkened slightly. "Because I know the people who run this town. They're more concerned with appearances than character. What happened in your last position, if you don't mind my asking?" Olivia hesitated, then decided she had nothing left to lose. "I taught at a private school in St. Louis. One of the fathers developed an attachment to me that I didn't reciprocate. When I rejected his advances, he told his wife I'd seduced him. She was well connected socially, and her version of events became the accepted truth. I was dismissed, and the rumors followed me everywhere." She met his eyes steadily. "I never touched that man, Mr. Kane, but no one believed me." "I believe you," Killian said simply. The words, spoken with such quiet certainty, made Olivia's throat tighten. "You don't know me." "No, but I'm a decent judge of character. And I know something about being on the wrong end of gossip." He leaned back as the waitress brought their meals. "My father ran the Kane Ranch for 30 years, built it up from nothing. When he died 5 years ago, some people in town thought I was too young and too reckless to handle it. They waited for me to fail. I proved them wrong." Olivia picked up her spoon, the warmth of the bowl seeping into her cold hands. "How old were you?" 23. "I'm 28 now." He started eating, unself-conscious despite the stares from other diners. "The ranch is doing better than it ever has. Turns out having something to prove can be powerful motivation." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. The stew was hearty and delicious, and Olivia felt strength returning to her body with each bite. Around them, the restaurant gradually cleared out, patrons casting disapproving glances their way as they left. "What will you do now?" Killian asked, pushing his empty bowl aside. "I don't know." The admission cost her, but it was the truth. "I'll need to find work somewhere, earn enough for passage to another town. Maybe somewhere smaller where my reputation hasn't preceded me." Killian was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes thoughtful. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Reynolds, and I want you to hear me out before you refuse." Olivia set down her spoon carefully. "I'm listening. My ranch is successful, but it's also overwhelming for one person to manage alone. I have 3 ranch hands who handle the cattle and horses, but the house is falling apart around me. I can't cook worth a damn, the place hasn't had a proper cleaning in months, and I'm drowning in paperwork I don't understand. I need help, someone capable and educated. Someone who can manage the household while I manage the land." You're offering me employment. Olivia's heart beat faster. Room, board, and $20 a month. You'd have your own room, privacy respected. There's a small library in the house, belonged to my mother. The work wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest. He met her eyes. And I'd expect nothing from you beyond what we agree to hear. You have my word as a gentleman, Miss Reynolds. Olivia studied his face, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motives. She'd become skilled at reading men's intentions over the past year, but Killian's expression remained open and sincere. Why? You don't know me either. Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, even if the first wasn't their fault. Because I could use the help, and you need a place to land. And because watching the good people of Prescott treat you like dirt today made me angry enough to want to prove them wrong about you. He smiled slightly. Plus, I'm getting tired of burning my own meals. Despite everything, Olivia felt a smile tug at her own lips. What will people say? An unmarried woman living on your ranch. They already say plenty about me. Let them talk. Killian leaned forward. I won't lie to you, Miss Reynolds. Taking this position might make things harder for you in town. But it's honest work, fair pay, and a roof over your head. The rest is up to you. Olivia thought of her dwindling funds, her lack of options, and the long road that had brought her here. She thought of the kindness in this stranger's eyes and the first offer of genuine help she'd received in longer than she could remember. It was reckless and probably unwise, but what choice did she have? All right, she said. I accept your offer, Mr. Kane. When would you like me to start? How about right now? I have my wagon outside. We can head to the ranch before full dark. He stood and dropped coins on the table for their meal. Fair warning, the place is in rough shape. I wasn't exaggerating about that. I'm not afraid of hard work. Olivia rose and gathered her bag. As they walked toward the door, she felt the weight of judgment from the town lifting slightly. At least she had somewhere to go now, someone who'd shown her basic human decency. The wagon ride north took 40 minutes, following a rutted road that climbed into the foothills. Killian pointed out landmarks as they went. A creek that ran strong in spring, a grove of cottonwoods where deer gathered at dawn, the neighbor's property line marked by a distinctive red rock formation. He talked easily, filling the silence without demanding conversation in return, and Olivia found herself relaxing despite her circumstances. The ranch appeared as they crested a rise, and Olivia caught her breath at the sight. The house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, set against the mountains with the last light of day painting everything gold. Corrals and outbuildings spread around it, and she could see horses grazing in a nearby pasture. It was beautiful and wild, nothing like the tame, ordered world she'd left behind. It was my grandfather's dream, Killian said, following her gaze. He came out here in '49 during the gold rush, but he was smart enough to realize cattle were more reliable than gold. Started small, built it up piece by piece. He pulled the wagon up to the house and helped her down. 2 dogs came running from the barn, tails wagging furiously. That's thunder and lightning, Killian said as they circled his legs. They're friendly but loud. Hope you like dogs. I love them. Olivia knelt to pet the eager animals, feeling their warm enthusiasm wash over her. When was the last time any creature had been this happy to see her? Killian carried her bag to the front door and pushed it open. Prepare yourself, he warned. The interior was indeed chaotic. Papers covered every surface, dirty dishes were stacked in the kitchen, and a layer of dust coated the furniture. But beneath the disorder, Olivia could see good bones. Solid furniture, beautiful stonework on the fireplace, windows that would let in plenty of light once they were cleaned. The bedroom upstairs on the right is yours, Killian said, looking slightly embarrassed by the mess. It was my mother's sewing room. I moved a bed in there yesterday after I got the idea to ask you. Sheets are clean, at least." Olivia set down her bag and turned to face him. "Mr. Kane, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "All right. Is there truly nothing you expect from me beyond housework and managing the household?" Killian held her gaze steadily. "Nothing. You have my word, Miss Reynolds. I know how this might look to outsiders, but this is purely an employment arrangement. Your room has a lock on the inside. You're free to leave whenever you choose, and I promise you'll be treated with respect under this roof." Something in his voice convinced her. Olivia nodded slowly. "Then you have a housekeeper, Mr. Kane. I'll start fresh tomorrow morning." "Just Killian is fine. We're not formal out here." He picked up her bag again. "Let me show you to your room so you can settle in. Are you hungry? I have bread and cheese at least, nothing fancy." "After that stew, I'm fine." Olivia followed him up the wooden stairs. "But thank you." The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the mountains and a sturdy bed covered with a colorful quilt. A washstand stood in one corner, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. The gesture, small as it was, made Olivia's eyes sting with unexpected tears. "I'll let you rest," Killian said from the doorway. "If you need anything, my room's at the end of the hall. Otherwise, I'll see you in the morning. Sleep as late as you need." After he'd gone, Olivia sat on the bed and let out a long breath. The springs creaked slightly under her weight, and outside the window she could hear evening birds calling to each other. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was shelter and safety, offered by a stranger who'd shown her more kindness than she'd received from anyone in months. She unpacked her meager belongings, changed into her nightgown, and slipped between the clean sheets. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. Her mind kept replaying the day, the rejection, the judgment, and then the unexpected mercy of a cowboy who'd looked at her and seen a person worth helping instead of a scandal to avoid. When she finally slept, it was deeply and without dreams. Morning came with sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of roosters crowing. Olivia dressed quickly in her most practical dress and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was empty, but she found evidence that Killian had been up for hours. Muddy boots by the door, a coffee cup in the sink, the smell of horses and hay lingering in the air. She stoked the fire in the stove and started exploring the kitchen. The pantry was well stocked with basics: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, salt pork. Clearly Killian could afford supplies. He just didn't know what to do with them. She found eggs in the cold cellar and set about making breakfast. By the time Killian returned from the barn, she'd prepared scrambled eggs, fried potatoes, and fresh biscuits. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the set table with something like wonder. "Is that actual food?" he asked. "It's breakfast," Olivia said, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "Sit down before it gets cold." Killian didn't need to be told twice. He washed his hands at the pump and sat, digging in with obvious enthusiasm. "This is incredible," he said after his first bite. "I've been living on hardtack and whatever the hands cook over the fire." "That's no way to run a ranch." Olivia sat across from him, surprised by how comfortable this felt. "You need proper meals to keep your strength up." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then Killian said, "I need to ride out to the south pasture today to check on some cattle. I'll be back by evening. The hands will be around if you need anything. That's Pete, Samuel, and Jack. They're good men, and I've already told them to treat you with respect." "What would you like me to prioritize?" Olivia asked. "There's a lot to tackle here." "Whatever you think is most important. You're in charge of the house, Miss Reynolds. I trust your judgment." "Olivia," she said. "If I'm calling you Killian, you should use my given name. He smiled, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "All right, Olivia. Fair enough." After Killian left, Olivia rolled up her sleeves and surveyed her new domain. She started with the kitchen, washing dishes, scrubbing surfaces, organizing the pantry into some kind of logical order. The physical work felt good after weeks of travel and uncertainty. Here, at least, she could see the results of her efforts. By midday, the kitchen gleamed. She'd found a bucket and mop and was working on the floors when someone knocked at the door. Opening it, she found a young man who couldn't be more than 20, holding his hat nervously. "I'm Pete, madam. Mr. Kane said you'd be managing the house now. Just wanted to introduce myself proper-like." "It's nice to meet you, Pete." Olivia noticed he kept his eyes respectfully downcast. "Would you and the other men like some lunch? I can bring something out to the bunkhouse." Pete's face lit up. "That would be mighty kind, madam. We usually just make do with whatever's on hand." Olivia prepared a simple meal of sandwiches and sent Pete back with a basket. Over the next few hours, she continued her campaign against chaos, moving from room to room with methodical determination. She found Killian's office and carefully organized the papers into stacks, making mental notes about what needed his attention. The house began to reveal itself as she worked. Someone had built it with love and care. The woodwork was detailed, the windows placed to catch the best light, the rooms flowing naturally from one to another. Olivia found herself imagining the family who'd lived here, the woman who'd sewn curtains for these windows and arranged furniture in these rooms. She was dusting the mantel in the main room when she found a photograph in a silver frame. It showed a younger Killian standing between an older couple, all three smiling at the camera. His mother had kind eyes, and his father's hand rested proudly on his son's shoulder. The love between them was evident even in the still image. That was taken the year before they died. Olivia startled, not having heard Killian return. He stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, dust covering his clothes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to pry." "You weren't." He walked over to stand beside her, looking at the photograph. "Mother died of fever when I was 19. Father followed 6 months later. Doctors said it was his heart, but I think he just couldn't live without her. They'd been together since they were 17. "That's beautiful," Olivia said softly. "Sad but beautiful. They had a good life together, built this place, raised me, loved each other every day." Killian set the frame back carefully. "That's what a marriage should be, I think. Partnership and respect and choosing each other day after day." Something in his voice made Olivia look at him more closely. "You've never married, never found the right person. Came close once, but she couldn't imagine living out here. Wanted city life, parties, society." He shrugged. "I couldn't imagine living anywhere else, so that was that." "Her loss," Olivia said, then blushed at her own boldness. Killian's eyes met hers, warm with appreciation. "Thank you. Though I'd say today was my gain. This place looks better than it has in years. You must have worked non-stop. I like being useful." Olivia gestured at the room. "And it's satisfying to see progress. There's still plenty to do, but we're getting there." "We." Killian repeated the word as if testing its weight. "I like the sound of that. Come on, I saw the basket you sent out to the men earlier. Any chance there's some actual supper in the kitchen too?" "Beef stew. I found a recipe book in the pantry and used what was available." "You're a miracle worker, Olivia Reynolds." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Killian woke before dawn to work the ranch, and Olivia transformed the house room by room. She cooked proper meals, managed the household accounts, and even started a small garden near the kitchen door. The ranch hands began finding excuses to come to the main house, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and the warmth that had been missing. The people of Prescott noticed too. When Olivia accompanied Killian to town for supplies, whispers followed them down the boardwalk. The respectable women turned their backs, and more than one man made assumptions that Killian had to shut down with a hard look. But there were also kind faces. The old man who ran the feed store and always added a little extra to their order, the young woman at the dry goods shop who smiled sympathetically when no one was looking. "Doesn't it bother you?" Olivia asked one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the mountains. "The way people talk about us." Killian rocked slowly in his chair, a cup of coffee in his hands. "Used to when I was younger. Now I figure people will think what they want regardless of the truth. The people who matter know my character. The rest don't signify." That's remarkably philosophical for a cowboy. My mother was a school teacher before she married my father. She made sure I got a proper education, even out here. He glanced at her. "What about you? Does it bother you?" "Yes," Olivia admitted. "I came here hoping to escape judgment, and instead I walked into more of the same. But at least here I have honest work and a safe place to sleep. That's more than I had in St. Louis." "You know," Killian said carefully, "you could leave if you wanted. I'd give you good references, help you find a position somewhere else. Somewhere the gossip wouldn't follow." Olivia looked at him in surprise. "Do you want me to leave?" "God, no." The words came out more forcefully than he seemed to intend. "I just want you to know you have options. You're not trapped here." "I don't feel trapped." And it was true, Olivia realized. Despite the complications, she'd felt more at home in these few weeks than she had anywhere in years. "Unless you're unhappy with my work. Your work is excellent. The house has never looked better. The books are organized for the first time in years, and I've gained 5 pounds from your cooking." He smiled at her. "You've made this place feel like a home again, Olivia. I'm grateful for that." Something warm unfurled in Olivia's chest at his words. She'd spent so long being unwanted that simple appreciation felt like water in the desert. "I'm grateful, too, for the chance you took on me." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell around them. Lightning bugs began to spark in the grass, and somewhere a coyote called to the rising moon. It was peaceful and perfect, and Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in far too long: contentment. But contentment, she was learning, was a fragile thing. The trouble started on a Saturday morning when Killian needed to go to town for supplies and asked Olivia to accompany him. They needed fabric for curtains and various household items that required a woman's judgment. Olivia agreed, though she felt apprehensive about facing the townspeople again. Prescott was busy with the weekend crowd. Cowboys from surrounding ranches mingled with families doing their shopping, and the saloons were already doing brisk business despite the early hour. Killian helped Olivia down from the wagon and offered his arm as they walked toward the general store. The stairs started immediately. A group of women outside the milliner's shop stopped their conversation to watch them pass, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright hostility. Inside the general store, conversations died as they entered. "Morning, Mr. Kane," the shopkeeper said, his tone carefully neutral. "What can I get for you today?" Killian handed over Olivia's list. "Whatever she needs. Put it on my account." The shopkeeper's eyes flickered to Olivia, and she saw calculation there. "Of course, Mr. Kane. Though I should mention prices have gone up some." "That's fine." Killian seemed oblivious to the tension in the room as he wandered off to look at tools, leaving Olivia to select fabric and thread. She was examining a bolt of blue calico when she heard the whispers start behind her. "Living out there alone with him. Can you imagine? My husband says Kane's always been wild. No surprise he'd take up with a woman of loose morals. Poor Mrs. Hartford would roll over in her grave if she knew what that house was being used for." Olivia's hands tightened on the fabric. She wanted to turn around and defend herself, to explain that her arrangement with Killian was entirely proper. But she'd learned that explanations never changed predetermined minds. Ladies. Killian's voice cut through the whispers like a knife. Olivia turned to see him standing right behind the gossiping women, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. "If you have something to say about Miss Reynolds, you can say it to me directly." The women blanched. The ringleader, a sharp-faced blonde Olivia recognized from her first day in town, lifted her chin defiantly. "We're simply concerned about your reputation, Mr. Kane, and the moral standards of this community." "My reputation is my own concern, Mrs. Patterson. And Olivia works for me in a completely respectable capacity, not that it's anyone's business but ours." His voice was cold and controlled. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have shopping to complete." He took Olivia's elbow and guided her to the counter, where the shopkeeper was pretending great interest in his ledger. They completed their purchase in tense silence, and Killian loaded everything into the wagon with jerky, angry movements. "I'm sorry," Olivia said once they were on the road back to the ranch. "I'm causing problems for you." "You're not causing anything. Those women create their own problems by being small-minded gossips." Killian's jaw was tight. "I won't have them treating you like that." "Maybe it would be better if I didn't come to town with you anymore." "No." He looked at her, his green eyes intense. "That would be letting them win. You have every right to hold your head up in Prescott. You're a good person, Olivia, and you've done nothing wrong." "They don't see it that way." "Then they're blind and foolish." He was quiet for a moment, then added more gently, "I meant what I said. If this becomes too much for you, I'll help you find another position elsewhere, but I'd hate to lose you." The last sentence was spoken so quietly Olivia almost missed it. She studied his profile as he drove, the strong line of his jaw, the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair. Over the past weeks, she'd grown accustomed to his presence, looked forward to their evening conversations on the porch, found herself listening for his step in the morning. When had this stranger become so important to her? "I don't want to leave," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "I like it at the ranch. I like the work, and I like—" She stopped herself before saying too much. "Like what?" Killian prompted. "The peace," she finished, though that wasn't entirely what she'd meant to say. "It's the first place I've felt safe in a long time." Killian reached over and briefly squeezed her hand. The gesture was over in a moment, but Olivia felt its warmth long after he'd returned his attention to the road. Back at the ranch, they fell into their usual rhythms, but something had shifted. Olivia caught Killian watching her as she worked, his expression thoughtful. She found herself more aware of his presence, the sound of his voice. The way he moved through the house, he was slowly learning to treat as a home again. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days and warm nights. The ranch thrived under Killian's careful management, and the house flourished under Olivia's attention. She'd sewn new curtains, planted flowers around the porch, and turned the neglected library into a cozy retreat where she spent her evenings reading. Killian often joined her there after supper, and they'd sit in companionable silence, she with a book and he with ranch accounts or correspondence. Sometimes they talked about everything and nothing. His childhood on the ranch, her memories of teaching, their dreams and disappointments. Slowly, carefully, they were building something neither wanted to name but both felt growing between them. One evening in late June, Olivia was reading when Killian set down his pen and said, "There's a dance in town next Saturday. Community celebration for Independence Day. I was thinking we might go." Olivia looked up from her book in surprise. "Together?" "Well, yes, unless you'd rather I drive you there and pretend we don't know each other." He smiled slightly. I know it might be uncomfortable given how some people feel, but I think we deserve a night of fun. And I'd be honored to have you as my companion. You know what people will say. People already say plenty. At least this way we'd get to dance and eat good food while they're talking. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I'm tired of hiding, Olivia. Tired of acting like we're doing something wrong when we're not. You're my friend and my employee, and I'm proud of both those facts. Friend. The word should have been enough, but Olivia felt a pang of something that might have been disappointment. She pushed it aside and considered his invitation. Part of her wanted to refuse to avoid the inevitable scrutiny and judgment, but a larger part was tired of being ashamed of nothing. All right, she said. I'd like to go to the dance with you. Killian's smile was bright enough to light the dim room. Excellent. Fair warning, though, I'm a terrible dancer. 2 left feet, according to my mother. I find that hard to believe. You're graceful enough with horses. Horses don't care if you step on their feet. Dancing partners tend to have stronger opinions. He stood and stretched, and Olivia tried not to notice how his shirt pulled across his shoulders. I should let you get back to your reading. Thanks for saying yes, Olivia. After he'd gone upstairs, Olivia sat with her book unopened in her lap, her mind racing. The dance was a public declaration of their friendship, maybe even more. It would cement the town's assumptions about their relationship, regardless of the truth. But it would also be a chance to spend an evening with Killian outside the ranch, to see him in a different context, to maybe understand these complicated feelings that grew stronger each day. She'd agreed to attend as his friend, but somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that friendship wasn't all she felt anymore. The week before the dance passed quickly. Olivia took extra care with her appearance, washing her hair with the rainwater she'd collected and pressing her best dress, a deep green cotton that brought out her eyes. It wasn't fancy, but it was respectable, and that mattered. Killian seemed nervous on Saturday morning, unusually quiet over breakfast. He'd shaved carefully and put on a clean shirt, and Olivia caught him checking his reflection in the hallway mirror more than once. The sight made her smile. It was endearing to see him unsure, this confident man who handled cattle and horses with such easy authority. They set out for town in the early evening, the wagon freshly washed and the horses groomed until they gleamed. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything gold and rose, and the air carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. It would have been perfect if Olivia hadn't been so nervous. You look beautiful, Killian said suddenly. I should have said that earlier. That dress is the exact color of the pines up in the high country. Thank you. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks. You look very handsome yourself. Cleaned up all right, did I? He grinned at her and some of the tension eased. Been a while since I bothered with social occasions. I'm probably rusty at the whole civilized behavior thing. I find you plenty civilized. You've never seen me after a week on the range. The hands would disagree with you strongly. They fell into their usual easy conversation, and by the time they reached Prescott, Olivia felt calmer. The town square had been decorated with bunting and lanterns, and a wooden platform had been constructed for dancing. Musicians were already playing, and people milled around tables laden with food. The conversations died as Killian helped Olivia down from the wagon. She felt the weight of every eye, saw the disapproval on familiar faces, heard the whispers start. But Killian offered his arm with a smile that said he didn't care what anyone thought, and Olivia took it, lifting her chin and meeting hostile stares with as much dignity as she could muster. Killian Kane. A booming voice cut through the whispers, and a large man with a thick beard pushed through the crowd. About time you showed your face at one of these things. We were starting to think you'd gone completely wild up at that ranch. Just busy, Tom. Killian shook the man's hand warmly. "Olivia, this is Tom Brennan. He owns the spread that borders mine to the east. Tom, this is Olivia Reynolds. She manages my household." Tom tipped his hat to Olivia, his eyes kind. "Pleasure, Miss Reynolds. My wife's been wanting to meet the woman who finally got Kane's house in order. She's over by the punch bowl if you want to say hello. Rose is the one in the yellow dress." "I'd like that, thank you." Olivia smiled, grateful for the friendly welcome. Rose Brennan turned out to be a warm, practical woman in her 40s with laugh lines around her eyes and flour still dusting her sleeve. She greeted Olivia with genuine enthusiasm and immediately pulled her into a conversation about recipes and household management, pointedly ignoring the disapproving looks from other women nearby. "Don't mind them," Rose said quietly, following Olivia's glance. "Half of them are jealous you landed such a good position, and the other half wouldn't know real scandal if it bit them. You're doing honest work for an honest wage, and that's nothing to be ashamed of." "Thank you," Olivia said, feeling her throat tighten with gratitude. "That means more than you know. Us practical women need to stick together. Lord knows the world's hard enough without tearing each other down." Rose squeezed her arm. "Now come try my apple cake. I'm quite proud of it." The evening improved from there. Not everyone was welcoming, but there were enough kind faces to balance the hostile ones. Olivia met several other ranch families, and while some were cool, others treated her with basic courtesy. She began to relax, even to enjoy herself. When the dancing started, Killian found her by the food tables and offered his hand. "Ready to risk your toes?" he asked. "You can't be that bad. You have been warned." He led her onto the dance floor as the musicians struck up a waltz. Other couples swirled around them, and Olivia was aware of people watching, judging. But then Killian's hand settled at her waist, his other hand clasping hers gently, and suddenly the rest of the world faded away. He was, as promised, not the most skilled dancer. But what he lacked in technique, he made up for in enthusiasm, twirling her around the platform with such obvious enjoyment that Olivia found herself laughing. His green eyes sparkled in the lantern light, and when he smiled at her, something in Olivia's chest expanded painfully. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Somewhere between that first dinner in town and this moment, spinning under the stars with his arms around her, she'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love with Killian Kane. With his kindness and his strength, his easy humor and quiet integrity. With the way he looked at her like she mattered, like she was worthy of respect and care. "Olivia," Killian's voice was concerned. "Are you all right? You look strange." "I'm fine," she managed. "Just a little dizzy from spinning." He immediately slowed their pace, his hand steadying at her waist. "Sorry, I get carried away. Mother used to say I had more enthusiasm than sense." "It's perfect," Olivia said, and meant it. This moment, this man, this unexpected life she'd stumbled into, all of it was perfect in a way she'd never imagined possible. They danced 3 more dances, and with each one, Olivia felt herself sinking deeper. She noticed small things. The way Killian's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strength in his hands, the scent of soap and leather that clung to him. She memorized the feeling of his arm around her waist, the warmth of his hand in hers, knowing that when this night ended, they'd go back to their careful distance. Because he'd said they were friends. Because he'd offered her employment and shelter, not his heart. Because she had no right to want more than he'd already given her. The dance ended late, and Killian helped Olivia back into the wagon for the ride home. She was quiet, lost in thoughts she didn't dare speak aloud. Above them, stars scattered across the black sky like diamond dust, and the warm night air carried the sounds of crickets and distant cattle. "Did you have a good time?" Killian asked as they turned onto the road that led to the ranch. "I did, surprisingly. Rose Brennan is wonderful." "The Brennans are good people. Known them since I was a kid." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm glad you came with me tonight, Olivia. Made it more enjoyable having someone to share it with." "I enjoyed it too." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for defending me in town that day and tonight, for not being ashamed to be seen with me." Killian pulled the wagon to a stop in the middle of the empty road and turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows, his eyes dark and serious. "I could never be ashamed of you," he said quietly. "You're one of the best people I've ever known, Olivia. Kind and hardworking and brave as hell. Any man would be proud to stand beside you." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning Olivia wasn't sure how to interpret. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she felt the moment stretch and shimmer with possibility. "Killian," she started, but he turned back to the horses and urged them forward, breaking whatever spell had been weaving itself around them. "We should get back. Early morning tomorrow." They completed the ride in silence, and when they reached the ranch, Killian helped her down from the wagon with his usual courtesy, but his touch lingered a moment longer than necessary. His eyes met hers in the darkness, and Olivia saw something there that made her breath catch. "Good night, Olivia," he said, his voice rough. "Good night, Killian." She went inside and up to her room, but sleep eluded her for hours. She replayed every moment of the evening, every word and glance, searching for meaning. Did he feel something for her beyond friendship and gratitude? Or was she projecting her own feelings onto his kindness? Downstairs, she heard Killian moving around, his footsteps pacing the floor of the main room. Apparently, she wasn't the only one who couldn't sleep. The summer deepened, hot and dry. Killian spent long days managing the ranch, preparing for the fall cattle drive that would take his herd to market. Olivia maintained the house and started teaching Pete to read in the evenings, something the young ranch hand had shyly requested. Life fell into comfortable patterns, but underneath, Olivia felt the constant current of her unspoken feelings. Killian seemed different too, though she couldn't quite define how. He was more attentive, found more excuses to come to the house during the day, lingered over their evening conversations. Sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something intense and searching that made her pulse race. They were circling each other, Olivia realized, both aware of something unspoken but neither brave enough to voice it. The breaking point came on a scorching afternoon in late July. Olivia was in the kitchen, making preserves from the wild berries she'd picked that morning. The heat was oppressive, and she'd opened all the windows trying to catch any hint of breeze. She'd pinned her hair up off her neck and rolled her sleeves above her elbows, propriety abandoned in favor of comfort. She was stirring the bubbling pot when Killian came in from the barn. He stopped short in the doorway, and something about his stillness made her turn. He was looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before, raw and hungry and completely unguarded. The wooden spoon nearly slipped from her hand. "I can't do this anymore," Killian said, his voice rough. "Do what?" Olivia's heart raced. "Pretend." He took a step closer, then another. "Pretend I don't think about you constantly. Pretend I don't count the hours until evening when we can talk. Pretend I hired you just for housework when the truth is I wanted a reason to keep you close." Olivia set down the spoon with trembling hands. "Killian, I'm in love with you, Olivia." The words came out fierce and certain. "I have been for months, probably since that first night when you sat across from me in that restaurant looking so brave despite everything. I'm in love with your strength and your kindness and the way you hum when you're cooking. I'm in love with your laugh and your mind and the way you've made this house a home again." "You said we were friends," Olivia managed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "We are friends. Best friends, but I want more than that if you'll have me." He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "I know I'm not much, just a cowboy with dirt under his fingernails and a ranch that demands everything I have, but I can offer you honesty and devotion and a love that won't waver. I can offer you a real home and a life built on respect and partnership. I can offer you everything I am if you want it." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks before she could stop them. "I thought you only saw me as an employee." "God, no, never just that." Killian's voice cracked. "But I didn't want to take advantage of your situation. You depend on me for your livelihood and shelter. It didn't seem fair to burden you with my feelings when refusing me might mean losing your home. You wonderful, ridiculous man." Olivia crossed the space between them and took his face in her hands. "I've been in love with you for months, too. Since the dance, maybe before. I've been terrified you'd never see me as anything more than your housekeeper." Killian's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs gentle against her tear-stained cheeks. "I see you, Olivia Reynolds. I see all of you, and I love what I see." "Then kiss me," she whispered. He did, lowering his head to capture her lips in a kiss that was tender and desperate all at once. Olivia melted against him, her arms winding around his neck, and kissed him back with months of pent-up longing. He tasted like coffee and sunshine, and his arms around her felt like the safest place in the world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Killian rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it's fast, but I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. Marry me and be my partner in everything. Let me love you for the rest of our lives." "Yes." Olivia laughed through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Olivia felt like she was flying. All the pain and rejection that had brought her here suddenly seemed worthwhile, because it had led her to this moment, to this man, to this love she'd never dared to hope for. Behind them, the preserves began to boil over, and they broke apart laughing as Olivia rushed to rescue the pot. Killian helped her clean up the mess, and they kept stopping to kiss, unable to keep their hands off each other now that the barriers between them had finally fallen. "When?" Killian asked as they worked. "When can we marry?" "Whenever you want." Olivia felt giddy with joy. "Tomorrow, if you like." "Tomorrow might be rushing it, but soon as we can arrange it." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "I want you as my wife, Olivia. Want it known that you're mine and I'm yours. Want to give you my name and my home and everything I have." "I want that too." She squeezed his hand. "Though the town will have plenty to say about it. Let them talk. We'll know the truth, and anyone who matters will be happy for us." He pulled her close again. "We'll have a good life together, Olivia. I promise you that. I know we will." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, stealing kisses between conversations, marveling at how quickly everything had changed. The house that had felt too big for just the two of them now seemed perfectly sized for a beginning. That evening, they told the ranch hands together. Pete whooped with joy and congratulated them enthusiastically. Samuel and Jack, the older hands, smiled and offered sincere well wishes. The dogs seemed to sense the celebration and barked excitedly, running in circles around the group. "Knew it was only a matter of time," Samuel said, his weathered face creasing in a grin. "You two have been looking at each other like lovesick calves for months." "Were we that obvious?" Olivia asked, laughing. "Only to anyone with eyes, madam." Jack tipped his hat. "Mr. Kane here's been useless half the time, mooning around instead of working." "I have not been mooning," Killian protested, but his smile gave him away. They decided to marry in 3 weeks. giving them time to make arrangements, but not so long that the waiting would be torture. Killian rode to the Brennan Ranch the next day to ask Tom to stand up with him, and Rose immediately offered to help Olivia with wedding preparations. Despite the disapproval of some townspeople, enough friendly faces emerged that Olivia began to feel she might actually belong in Prescott after all. She wrote letters to old friends from St. Louis, carefully explaining her circumstances and inviting them to share her joy. She didn't know if any would come, but writing the words felt like reclaiming her story, refusing to be defined by other people's judgments. The weeks passed in a blur of activity. Olivia sewed a new dress, simple but lovely, from cream-colored fabric Rose helped her select. Killian commissioned a wedding band from the silversmith, a delicate piece engraved with wildflowers. They cleaned the house from top to bottom, arranged for a simple ceremony at the ranch with a preacher from a neighboring town, and planned a celebration for their friends and the ranch hands. Through it all, they learned each other in new ways. Killian courted her properly now, bringing her wildflowers from the meadows, reading to her in the evenings, stealing kisses in the barn when no one was looking. Olivia marveled at his tenderness, the way he treated her like something precious. She'd been rejected and judged for so long that being loved felt almost miraculous. 3 days before the wedding, a letter arrived from St. Louis. Olivia opened it with shaking hands and found pages filled with her former teaching colleague Margaret's neat handwriting. Margaret wrote that she'd always believed Olivia's version of events, that she was sorry for not speaking up at the time, and that she was happy. Olivia had found love and a fresh start. She couldn't make the journey to Arizona, but she sent her blessing and a small gift of money to help with the wedding expenses. Olivia cried over the letter, overwhelmed by the kindness. Killian found her on the porch, tears streaming down her face, and immediately gathered her close. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Nothing's wrong." Olivia showed him the letter. "Someone believes me, someone from before, someone who knew me then. She believes I told the truth." Killian kissed her forehead. "Of course she does, because you did tell the truth. You're one of the most honest people I've ever known. I thought everyone from that life had turned their backs on me. It means something, knowing I wasn't completely alone. You're not alone now either. You have me, and you'll have me for the rest of our lives." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the August sky deep blue and cloudless. Olivia woke early, nerves and excitement churning in her stomach. Rose arrived before breakfast to help her prepare, bringing a bouquet of wildflowers and a borrowed pearl necklace. "Something borrowed," Rose said, fastening it around Olivia's neck. "It was my mother's. She wore it on her wedding day and I wore it on mine. Now you wear it on yours. Rose, I can't, you can and you will. Consider it welcoming you to the community properly." Rose stepped back to look at her. "Oh, honey, you're absolutely beautiful. Killian's going to lose his ability to speak when he sees you." Olivia looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the glowing woman staring back. Her cream dress fit perfectly, the pearl necklace gleamed at her throat, and her dark hair was pinned up with the wildflowers woven through it. She looked happy, she realized. Truly, completely happy. The ceremony was held in front of the house, with the mountains as backdrop. They'd set up chairs for the dozen or so guests, and Pete had spent the morning arranging wildflowers around the area. The preacher, an elderly man with kind eyes, stood ready. The ranch hands wore their cleanest clothes and stood off to the side, grinning. Tom brought Killian out from the barn where he'd been waiting. He wore a new suit, his dark hair combed back, his green eyes bright with emotion. When he saw Olivia, he froze mid-step, and his expression transformed into something so tender and awed that it took her breath away. Rose walked Olivia down the short aisle to where Killian waited. He took her hands in his, holding them like they were made of glass, and smiled at her with such love that Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. The preacher began speaking, but Olivia barely heard the words. She was lost in Killian's eyes, in the warmth of his hands, in the reality that this was actually happening. She was marrying this good, kind man who'd seen her at her lowest and offered her not just shelter but love. "I do," she heard herself say when prompted, her voice clear and certain. "I do," Killian echoed, and his voice was rough with emotion. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Killian kissed her gently, sweetly, as their friends cheered. When they broke apart, both were crying, smiling through their tears. "Hello, Mrs. Kane," Killian whispered. "Hello, Mr. Kane," Olivia whispered back. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Rose had prepared a feast, and the ranch hands produced instruments Olivia hadn't known they possessed. There was music and dancing, laughter and stories. Even some of the neighboring ranchers who'd been cool to Olivia before warmed up over the course of the evening, won over by the obvious devotion between the newlyweds. As the sun set and the party continued around them, Killian pulled Olivia away from the crowd. They walked hand in hand to the pasture fence and stood watching the horses graze in the golden light. "Happy?" Killian asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible." Olivia leaned against him. "I came to Prescott expecting rejection and judgment. Instead, I found a home and a partner and a love I didn't know existed." "The town rejected you," Killian said quietly, "but I welcomed you with open arms, and I'll keep welcoming you every single day for the rest of our lives." "You welcomed me with open arms and a warm bed," Olivia corrected with a smile. "That first night, when you gave me that room with the wildflowers in the jar, that was the first time in so long that someone had shown me true kindness. That was just the beginning." Killian turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. "I plan to spend the rest of my life showing you kindness and love, so much love you'll get tired of it. I could never tire of your love." He kissed her as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Behind them, the party continued, but in that moment, they were alone in their own perfect world. A world they'd build together, brick by brick, day by day, with honesty and respect and the kind of love that lasted. That night, after their guests had departed, and the ranch had settled into quiet, Killian carried Olivia over the threshold of their home. Not the guest room she'd occupied for months, but their room, the master bedroom he'd carefully prepared for this night. There were candles lit and fresh flowers on the dresser, and the bed was made with the quilt his mother had sewn. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kane," he said, setting her down gently. Olivia looked around the room that was now truly hers, at the man who was now truly her husband, and felt peace settle over her like a blessing. She'd traveled so far, endured so much, and somehow found her way to exactly where she was meant to be. "Welcome home," she echoed and kissed him. They loved each other tenderly that night, learning each other's bodies with patience and care, expressing with touch what words couldn't fully capture. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Killian's hand stroking through Olivia's hair, both marveling at the turn their lives had taken. "Do you think you'll miss teaching?" Killian asked into the darkness. "Sometimes, probably. I loved it." Olivia traced patterns on his chest. "But maybe someday we'll have children of our own to teach, and if we don't, well, Pete seems eager to learn. Maybe I can tutor others who need it." "You'd be wonderful at that." He kissed the top of her head. "Whatever you want to do, we'll figure it out together. That's what partners do." "Partners," Olivia repeated, loving the word. "I like that." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Olivia's dreams were peaceful for the first time in years. The first months of marriage were an adjustment as they learned to navigate sharing space and making decisions together. But the foundation of friendship they'd built made the transition easier than it might have been. They laughed through misunderstandings, supported each other through challenges, and fell more deeply in love with each passing day. Autumn came, and the cattle drive commenced. Killian was gone for 3 weeks, and Olivia missed him with an intensity that surprised her. The house felt empty without his presence, and she counted the days until his return. When he finally rode in, dusty and exhausted but successful, she ran to meet him and he caught her in his arms, spinning her around with joy. "Never again," he said, kissing her. "3 weeks is too long. Next year I'm leaving the drive to Tom and staying home with my wife." The winter was harsh, with snow blocking the road to town for weeks at a time. But Olivia didn't mind being snowed in. She and Killian spent long evenings by the fire, reading and talking and making love in the warmth of their bed while wind howled outside. They were their own complete world, and it was enough. Spring brought a surprise. Olivia realized her monthly courses had stopped, and a visit to the doctor in town confirmed what she'd suspected. She was with child. She told Killian that evening on their porch, watching his face as understanding dawned. "A baby." His voice was awed. "We're having a baby in October, the doctor thinks." Killian pulled her into his arms and held her like she might break. "I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a mother. We're going to have a family." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though his expression made the answer clear. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He knelt down and pressed his face to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father speaking. Your mother and I are very excited to meet you." Olivia laughed and cried at the same time, overcome with emotion. A year ago, she'd been alone and desperate. Now she had a husband who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and a baby on the way. The transformation felt miraculous. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia felt well and continued managing the household, though Killian fretted over her constantly and tried to make her rest more than she wanted. Rose visited regularly, bringing advice and baby clothes and cheerful reassurance. Even some of the town women who'd rejected Olivia softened, maternal instinct overcoming judgment. In late October, on a crisp autumn morning, Olivia's labor began. Rose and the doctor attended her, and Killian paced anxiously outside the bedroom door until Rose finally took pity on him and let him in. He held Olivia's hand through the final hours, his presence giving her strength. Their son was born as the sun set, entering the world with a lusty cry. The doctor placed him in Olivia's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face with wonder. He had Killian's dark hair and her nose, and his eyes, when they briefly opened, were the same striking green as his father's. "A boy," she whispered. "Killian, we have a son." Killian, who'd faced down stampedes and mountain lions without flinching, cried openly as he looked at their child. "He's perfect. You're perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for this gift." They named him Kieran William Kane after both grandfathers. Kieran proved to be a healthy, happy baby who quickly became the center of their world. Killian was a devoted father, spending hours simply watching his son sleep, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with him during fussy nights. The ranch hands adored Kieran, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to earn his smiles. Pete especially seemed smitten, treating the baby with tender reverence. Rose became like a grandmother, visiting often and showering Kieran with love and knitted gifts. As Olivia healed and adjusted to motherhood, she marveled at how full her life had become. The teaching position she'd lost seemed like a distant memory, barely real. This life, with its daily challenges and simple joys, felt infinitely more precious than anything she'd left behind. Winter came again, and they celebrated Kieran's first Christmas in front of the fireplace. Killian had carved a small wooden horse for their son, who was too young to appreciate it but clutched it in his chubby fist nonetheless. They exchanged simple gifts and kisses, and Olivia felt happiness so complete it scared her sometimes. "What are you thinking?" Killian asked, seeing her expression. "That I'm afraid to be this happy. Like it might be taken away. It won't be." He pulled her close, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby in her arms. "This is our life, Olivia. We built it together and it's solid and real. Nothing's taking it away." She believed him and her fear eased. The years flowed by like water. Kieran grew into a bright, curious toddler who followed his father everywhere, his small legs pumping to keep up with Killian's long strides. The ranch continued to thrive, and Killian and Olivia became respected members of the community. The whispers about their relationship faded as people saw the genuine love and partnership between them. When Kieran was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This time she carried a daughter, born in the spring with auburn hair like her mother and her father's smile. They named her Kathleen Rose, after Killian's mother and their dear friend. Rose Brennan cried when they told her, honored beyond words. Kathleen was gentler than her brother had been, a peaceful baby who seemed content to simply observe the world around her. Kieran was fascinated by his sister, helping his mother care for her with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could muster. Olivia sometimes thought about the man in St. Louis, whose lies had upended her life. She'd heard through Margaret's letters that he'd left his wife and moved away, his reputation in tatters after the truth had eventually emerged. The vindication should have felt good, but instead, Olivia just felt pity for everyone involved. That life was so distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. She taught Kieran his letters in the kitchen while Kathleen played at her feet. She worked alongside Rose to organize a library for Prescott, donating many of the books from Killian's mother's collection. She helped younger ranch wives learn household management, passing on the skills she'd developed. She built a life of purpose and meaning, surrounded by love. Pete, who'd learned to read and write under Olivia's patient tutelage, married a young woman from town and started a family of his own. He eventually became Killian's ranch foreman, a position of responsibility he handled with quiet competence. The ranch expanded steadily, and Killian hired more hands, building a reputation as a fair boss who treated his workers well. When Kathleen was 2, they discovered Olivia was pregnant once more. This time, twin boys arrived in a chaotic birth that left everyone exhausted but overjoyed. James and Joshua were identical, with their father's coloring and their mother's eyes, and keeping track of which was which became a family challenge. The house that had once seemed too large now rang with children's laughter and running feet. Olivia often paused in her work to simply listen, marveling at the fullness of it all. The silence she'd once inhabited seemed like a lifetime ago. Kieran grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch and wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. Kathleen showed an early gift for drawing and spent hours sketching the horses and mountains. The twins were mischievous and inseparable, constantly getting into trouble but impossible to stay angry with. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Killian took Olivia riding to the high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. They'd left the children with Rose and Pete's wife, stealing a rare day alone together. They spread a blanket and lay watching clouds drift across the blue sky. "Do you remember that first day?" Killian asked, his hand finding hers. "When you stepped off the stagecoach looking so determined and so scared. I remember thinking I'd made a terrible mistake coming here." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I was so wrong. This was the best decision I ever made, even though I didn't know it at the time. I knew. Killian rolled onto his side to look at her. When I saw you sitting on that bench, looking lost but refusing to cry, something in me recognized something in you. I can't explain it better than that. I just knew you were important. You saved me, Olivia said quietly. In every way a person can be saved. No, Killian kissed her softly. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to land while you did it. You're the strongest person I know, Olivia Kane. You took a bad situation and turned it into something beautiful. You made a home and a family from scratch. You did that. We did that, she corrected. Together. They made love in the meadow sweet and slow, celebrating a decade of partnership and love. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking about their children and the ranch and their dreams for the future. The life they'd built was different from anything either had imagined, but it was theirs, earned through perseverance and faith. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, Olivia looked at the house coming into view with 4 children visible on the porch, waiting for their parents. Rose stood with them, waving. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the setting sun painted everything gold. Home, she said simply. Home, Killian agreed. They were greeted with enthusiastic hugs and competing stories about the day's adventures. Kathleen had drawn a picture of her parents that made Olivia tear up. The twins had helped Rose make cookies, though evidence of their help was visible in the flour covering their faces. Kieran had fixed the gate on the chicken coop all by himself. That night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house had settled into quiet, Olivia and Killian sat on their porch in their familiar rocking chairs. The stars were brilliant overhead, and somewhere a coyote sang to the moon. You know, Killian said thoughtfully, sometimes I try to imagine what my life would be like if you hadn't come to Prescott that day. If Mrs. Hartford hadn't died, or if you'd taken a position somewhere else, or if I hadn't been in town to see you. It's impossible to picture. You've become so central to everything I am. I feel the same way. Olivia reached for his hand. The town rejected me, but you welcomed me. You gave me not just a warm bed, but a whole life, a family, a purpose, love beyond what I imagined possible. And you gave me all of that too. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working myself to exhaustion because I didn't know what else to do with myself. You reminded me what I was working for. You made the ranch into a home instead of just a business. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the night deepen around them. Inside, their children slept safely. The ranch spread around them, thriving and beautiful. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Kieran married at 21, bringing home a kind young woman named Sarah who fit perfectly into the family. They built a house on ranch land and started their own family, making Olivia and Killian grandparents. Watching Killian with his grandson, seeing the same tenderness he'd shown his own children, made Olivia fall in love with him all over again. Kathleen pursued her art, eventually selling her paintings in shops as far away as Phoenix. She married a gentle schoolteacher who encouraged her talents and made her laugh. They lived in Prescott proper but visited the ranch often, bringing their children to run wild the way Kathleen had as a child. The twins took longer to settle down, spending their late teens and early 20s exploring and adventuring before finally returning to the ranch. James became a horse breeder of some renown, while Joshua showed an aptitude for business that helped the ranch navigate changing economic times. They married sisters, much to everyone's amusement, and built homes near each other on the northern section of the property. Rose and Tom Brennan aged gracefully, becoming beloved elder statespeople of the community. When Tom died at 73, Rose moved into a small cottage on the Kane property, where she was surrounded by the family she'd helped nurture. She spent her days spoiling her honorary grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her presence a constant source of comfort and wisdom. Pete ran the ranch operations as Killian gradually stepped back, allowing younger hands to do the harder physical work. Olivia's hair gained silver threads, and Killian's face grew more weathered, but their love remained constant, a steady flame that never dimmed. On their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration at the ranch. Nearly 100 people gathered, testament to the community the Kanes had built through years of fair dealing and genuine care. There was music and dancing, abundant food, and speeches that made both Olivia and Killian cry. As evening fell and the party continued around them, Olivia and Killian slipped away to their favorite spot on the porch. The house behind them rang with laughter and music, their family's joy a tangible presence. 25 years, Killian said, shaking his head in wonder. When I offered you that job, I never imagined it would lead to all of this. Did you really hire me just for housekeeping? Olivia teased. Or did you have ulterior motives even then? Maybe a little bit of both. He grinned at her, the expression still boyish despite the gray in his hair. I told myself I was being charitable, but looking back, I think I was already halfway in love with you. Stubborn woman sitting on that bench, refusing to give up even though the world had kicked you down. The world kicked me down, but you helped me back up. And then you stood beside me while I learned to stand on my own. Olivia took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after years of practice. Every good thing in my life traces back to that moment when you offered me dinner and a job. Every good thing in mine traces to you saying yes. Killian brought her hand to his lips. You took a lonely cowboy and made him into a husband, father, grandfather. You made a house into a home and a piece of land into a legacy. They sat quietly, listening to their family celebrating inside. Grandchildren ran past, playing some complicated game only they understood. Adult children checked on them periodically, making sure they had everything they needed. The dog's descendants of thunder and lightning dozed at their feet. As the stars emerged overhead and the celebration mellowed into gentle conversation, Olivia reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her here. She'd arrived in Prescott broken and desperate, rejected by a town that knew nothing about her except cruel gossip. She could have let that rejection define her, could have carried bitterness and anger for the rest of her life. Instead, she'd found one person willing to see past rumor to the truth of who she was. One person who'd offered help without judgment, safety without conditions. And from that single act of kindness, an entire life had grown, a marriage built on respect and partnership, children raised with love and security, a legacy of community and care that would ripple forward through generations. The town that had rejected her eventually learned to respect her, won over by her actions and the evidence of her character. But by then, their approval meant little. She'd learned that the opinions of strangers held no power unless she gave it to them. What mattered was how she treated others, how she lived her values, how she loved and was loved in return. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" Killian asked, studying her face in the dim light. "About how the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best things. About how getting fired and gossiped about and rejected brought me here to you, to this life." She smiled at him. "About how grateful I am that the town rejected me, because otherwise I might never have found the courage to start over. And I'm grateful I was there to welcome you." Killian stood and pulled her to her feet. "Dance with me." They swayed together on the porch to music drifting from inside, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. His arms around her felt the same as they had on their wedding day, strong and sure and safe. Her head fit perfectly against his shoulder like she was made to stand exactly there. "I love you, Olivia Kane," Killian whispered into her hair. 25 years later, and I love you more than I did on the day we married." "I love you too," Olivia whispered back. "Today, tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that." Inside, someone called for them to come cut the cake. Their grandchildren began chanting their names, demanding their presence. But for one more moment, they stayed on the porch, holding each other in the darkness, grateful for the unexpected paths that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through every challenge. Finally, they went inside to rejoin their family, hands still clasped, smiles matching. The party lasted long into the night, full of laughter and stories, celebrating not just 25 years of marriage but the family and community those years had created. As Olivia moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and well wishes, she caught Killian's eye across the room. He smiled at her, that special smile reserved just for her, and mouthed the words, "I love you." She mouthed them back, her heart full to overflowing. The years continued their steady march. Olivia and Killian grew older together, their hair white now, their faces lined with time but their eyes still bright when they looked at each other. They spent their days surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, the house always full of noise and activity. The ranch continued to thrive under new leadership, though the elder Kanes were still consulted on major decisions. Their expertise and wisdom were valued, their experiences forming the foundation on which younger generations built. On a spring morning in their 38th year of marriage, Killian woke to find Olivia watching him with a soft smile. "Good morning," she said. "I had the strangest dream." "Tell me." He pulled her close, relishing the warmth of her body against his. "I dreamed about the day I arrived in Prescott, standing in front of that general store, feeling so lost and scared. But in the dream, I could see the future spreading ahead of me like a map. I could see you and our children and this whole beautiful life we'd build together." She traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. And Dream Me wasn't scared anymore because she knew everything would be all right. "Everything is all right," Killian confirmed. "More than all right. It's wonderful." They rose and dressed, moving through their morning routine with the ease of long practice. Breakfast, coffee on the porch, discussing the day ahead. Simple things, but precious for their very simplicity. Their eldest great-granddaughter visited that afternoon, a bright 7-year-old named Olivia who'd been named for her great-grandmother. Young Olivia climbed into her namesake's lap and demanded stories, particularly the story of how great-grandma and great-grandpa had met. "Well," Olivia began, settling the child more comfortably, "I arrived in town on a stagecoach and I was very worried about what would happen to me. Because the mean people were talking about you," young Olivia supplied. She'd heard this story many times but never tired of it. "That's right. But then your great-grandfather saw me, and he was kind when others weren't. He offered me a job and a place to live, and slowly we became friends and then we fell in love. And then you got married and had babies and lived happily ever after," the child bounced excitedly. "Yes, exactly that." Olivia kissed the top of her great-granddaughter's head. "The important part of the story is that even when things seem scary and hard, good things can still happen. You just have to be brave and keep going." "Were you very brave, great-grandma?" "I tried to be." "Your great-grandfather helped me be braver." Killian, listening from his chair, reached over to squeeze Olivia's hand. "You were always brave. You just needed someone to remind you." Young Olivia eventually ran off to play with her cousins, leaving the elders alone again. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. In the distance, they could hear children's laughter and the everyday sounds of the ranch operating smoothly. "You think," Killian asked, "that we've done all right, built something worth building?" "Look around you." Olivia gestured to encompass the house, the land visible through the windows, the family that filled every corner of their lives. "I'd say we've done more than all right. We've built a legacy of love and hard work and treating people with decency. What more could anyone want?" "Nothing," Killian agreed. "Absolutely nothing." That evening, after their family had departed and quiet had settled over the house once more, they sat in their familiar spot on the porch. The stars were emerging, the same stars that had witnessed countless evenings of their companionship. Night birds called to each other, and the air carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. "Thank you," Olivia said into the peaceful silence. "For what? For seeing me when everyone else looked away. For believing in me when I barely believed in myself. For loving me so completely that I learned to be whole again." She turned to face him. "For giving me this life, Killian, this beautiful, unexpected life." "The thanks are mutual," Killian said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me everything that matters, love and family and purpose. Before you, I was just existing. After you, I started living." They kissed, soft and sweet, their lips meeting with the familiarity of thousands of kisses, but still carrying that spark that had ignited so many years ago. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The town of Prescott had rejected her, all those years ago, had turned its back on a young woman who needed compassion and had instead received judgment. But one man had welcomed her with open arms and a warm bed, had offered her shelter and safety when she had nowhere else to turn. And from that single act of kindness, from one person choosing decency over gossip, an entire life had bloomed, sitting on her porch with her husband's hand in hers and the stars overhead. Olivia Reynolds Kane felt only gratitude. Gratitude for the hard roads that had led her here, for the rejection that had forced her to find her own strength, for the love that had taught her what home really meant. The town had rejected her, but in the end, that didn't matter at all. Because the cowboy had welcomed her, and that had made all the difference. Their story was one of hope and second chances, of finding love in unexpected places, and building something lasting from the ashes of disappointment. It was a story they would pass down through generations, a reminder that one person's kindness could change everything, that judgment from strangers held no real power, and that the best things in life often came from the hardest moments. As the night deepened around them and the ranch settled into sleep, Olivia and Killian remained on their porch, treasuring these quiet moments together. They'd built a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and meaning. And it had all started with a rejection and a welcome, a wound and a healing, an ending and a beautiful new beginning. The end.